Good evening, everybody. Our community meeting is going to begin in just a couple minutes. We just are letting attendees come into the meeting, and we will get started in just a few minutes. Once again, good evening, everybody. We're just waiting a couple minutes to allow people to join the meeting, and then we will get the meeting started here in just a minute or two. So thanks for your patience. All right. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our community meeting this evening to discuss the proposed Nighthawk energy storage project. My name is Derek Danziger, and I'm going to be the moderator for tonight's meeting. I, along with the Katz and Associates team, have been working for the past year and a half to 2 years with the Tenaska and Arivon teams, who you'll meet tonight, on community outreach and engagement about this particular proposed project, as well as a project that was recently approved similar to this in the Barrio Logan community near downtown San Diego. So we thank all of you for joining us tonight, and look forward to a good dialogue with the community this evening. As we look at our agenda for tonight, what we plan to do is to do a project presentation so that everybody gets a clear understanding of what this proposed project entails, and can maybe clear up some misconceptions or concerns that people may have, or questions that they have. We will then go ahead and move into a Q&A session. We've received a number of comments that people have submitted to us via email, through the website and through email. And so we want to make sure that we address all of those comments. And then those of you that have joined us online, we will have an option for you to speak to us, and I'll tell you how to do that in just a minute. So first up will be our project presentation. Following that will be the Q&A, and then we plan to conclude at 7:30. But if we're still running past that time, we will clearly stay and address questions that people have. So just a couple of sort of housekeeping things about tonight's meeting. If we can move to the next slide, please. So for your awareness, this meeting is being recorded, so that you will have access to this meeting and can go back. We will be posting it on the project website at nighthawkenergystorage.com. It usually, we'll try to get it up there tonight, but if not, for sure by tomorrow, we'll have that posted. So we are recording that. Microphones are muted during the presentation. This is so that we can have the speakers able to talk without interruption, but we will undo people's microphones when they're able to speak, so that everybody gets a chance to speak. When you are going to want to submit a question, there's written questions that you can submit by using the Q&A section at the very bottom of your screen. So if you're on your computer and you see the Q&A section, feel free to submit a question there, and we can see those questions as they come in. And then we will also be accepting questions from people via the raise hand function. So you'll see at the bottom of your screen where it says raise hand. When we get to that Q&A portion, if you'd like to verbalize your comments or have questions, we can do that then using that particular function. So all the questions will be following the presentation. As this is a community meeting and everybody is here to have a good dialogue about what's going on, we just ask people to please use appropriate and respectful language as you would in any public forum. So we appreciate that as well. Also, the presentation that you're going to see tonight is being, or it has already just been posted on the Nighthawk project website, so nighthawkenergystorage.com. So the entire PowerPoint presentation that you'll see is available on that website. So that's it for the kind of ground rules and how the meeting's going to run tonight. It's now my pleasure to introduce Vice President of Project Development for Tenaska, Keith Latham. He will be delivering the project presentation, and then again, we'll do all the Q&A following the presentation. So Keith, I will turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Derek, and welcome again, everybody. On behalf of Arivon and Tenaska, thank you for participating tonight, and we hope to have a good discussion, as Derek mentioned, and go through the dialogue to answer questions that you may have. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is gain the community support for our transmission line and our project. And ultimately, what we would like to have is an easement from the Stonebridge community to cross through the already disturbed utility corridor from our project, from the edge of Poway, going across Beeler Canyon Road and up to Miramar in the substation. And we think this is the environmentally preferred alternative of everything we've looked at. The other alternatives are clearly more disruptive, or would be more disruptive to the Stonebridge community. But we'll go through all that as we go through the process of the presentation here. I just want to say that we've got a lot of information to cover. I'm going to try to do it very quickly and answer a lot of the issues and questions that have been brought up. But at the end, we'll have opportunities to go deeper. And we've got a lot of folks on the line that can go deep into some of the technical questions or whatever we need to answer to hopefully get good answers for you. And if by some chance there's something we don't know, we're definitely going to take that question down and get back to you all. With that, I'd just like to say that we've kind of been working on this project for several years now, and ultimately started our dialogue interaction with the Stonebridge community at the public meeting at the City Council in Poway last February of 2022. Since that time, we went and had a conversation with the board of directors at Stonebridge, and then we had a public meeting, open house at the community park up in Stonebridge back in last June, and have subsequently been working through the overall development of the process, and are now here again tonight to try to answer questions and go through our project description for you all. Not much has changed since last time. It's 300 megawatts, 4 hours of storage, 1,200 megawatt hours of battery, lithium ion technology up on Kirkham Way. And you can see on the screen that it goes through your projects, down through your property, along the utility corridor, all the way to the Miramar base. So it's all underground facilities. That's one thing that was made very clear in our very first meeting at the Poway City Council, that above ground was not going to work, and we quickly made that change to make sure these are all underground facilities. Next slide, please. I think most people know where this is located. It's up on the hill of what we call the granite site, and it's on a roughly 100-some acre project site where that's currently being mined and reclaimed by the Granite Construction Company, owned by Clearco up near Costco and Home Depot on top of the hill. And again, these are Tesla lithium-ion batteries. And the biggest thing, I think, from what we can tell you about this facility and its safety from a fire protection standpoint is that this is lithium iron phosphate. LFP is the latest technology that is the safest technology of lithium ion batteries. And we'll talk a lot more about that later, but just know that this is different technology than has been used previously and has been the subject of lots of stories in the press. But basically, we've been working hard to make this a safe and good asset for the community and the region, and ultimately believe that's what it can be. Next slide, please. Just to kind of put things in perspective from Stonebridge, we've got, you don't pay attention to the pictures on the left side. We've got subsequent slides to show you what this will look like. But at the closest distance from the edge of the far southern edge of our pad is about a half a mile to the Stonebridge community, to any resident. And we've got 3 key observation points is what KOP stands for. And we've also got elevations. Our pad elevation is roughly 867 feet. It's about the same elevation as Kirkham Way. And then basically the topography goes down to Beeler Canyon Road and then kind of goes back up the canyon towards Stonebridge and the homes in Stonebridge. So I've got also a cross-sectional view that I'll show in just a second as well. Next slide, please. This is KOP1, which is key observation point 1. And this is at an elevation of 704 feet versus the 867, where the facility is going to be up on top of the hill where the arrow is pointing to. And as you can see, you're really not going to see it from this location or really any location within Stonebridge. It's not going to be visually apparent. The higher elevations of Stonebridge are further to the south and further to the east. And where you can see it, you really won't be able to tell anything because you'll be 3/4 of a mile or further away from the actual facility. Next slide, please. This is observation point 2. And again, this is at an elevation of 809 versus 867. You can kind of see a little bit where it is in the second picture there. It's just a little bit shaded green from, I guess, whatever will be done to mitigate and bring the vegetation below the project back to normal, but otherwise you really can't see that. Finally, observation point number 3. Next slide, please. This is just further east and about 4,000 feet away from the facility. Again, really not very visible from that distance. Next slide. So this is a cross section showing just what the topography looks like out there. So if you start up on the right-hand side of the bottom drawing, you can see the project pad at 860-foot elevation. Going down through that towards the bottom, towards the left-hand side is Beeler Canyon Road, the flat spot there. Then it starts going back up the hill to observation point number 2, which again was at elevation 809, just to show you that you're looking across the canyon and across the mining site before you can even get up to see our pad site up above your sight line and from this elevation. Next slide, please. So just to give you an idea of what our overall schedule is, we've been working on the design for a couple of years and working on our application submittal for a while. Submitted our application back in March of 2022, started our permit processing, and that's ongoing. Starting construction is hoped for after we get through our permit process, and commercial operations date is expected to be a year from that. It's a 12-month construction period for the facility and about a 2 to 3 month construction period for the transmission line. The expected facility life is about 20 years. And next slide, please. Want to talk about some of the issues that we've heard about, or some of the resolutions that we've been able to provide. I mentioned the overhead transmission lines right out off the bat. That was a major non-starter when this was brought up, and we've committed immediately to fully underground transmission lines. Open trenching. When we were back at the community in June of last year, we were thinking about open trenching across Stonebridge Parkway. That would have been probably nighttime construction to minimize traffic disruptions. Subsequently, we decided, for both the community benefit as well as environmental benefits, to ensure we miss and don't impact wetlands on the other side of Stonebridge, we decided to bore underneath the Stonebridge Parkway. We heard a lot about one way in and one way out, and quite frankly, when we started this process, I commented at our open house in June of last year that while we empathize with the issue, I don't think there's anything we can do about that. But we started thinking about that, hearing about it, and talking about it, meeting on our site, and Granite Construction has done a lot to put back the to restore the wetlands, and they built effectively a bridge over Beeler Creek. So at the bottom of their construction facility has been restored, and now there's a bridge over the creek. And so we started thinking about it and talking about it, and ultimately we're able to talk to some fire departments at both San Diego and Poway, and got buy-in that there could be emergency secondary egress through the project site up to Kirkham Way and Poway. Anyway, this is something that we're excited to be telling the community, that we think this is a significant benefit and longstanding issue. We're hopeful that we can resolve this. So we've additionally, we've committed to making sure that we address brush that is overgrown in some of these access roads that are there, and ultimately we'll be continuing to resolve this issue and coordinate this issue with the various fire departments and emergency response personnel, as well as the community, as we work through the development and get into construction of our project. Next slide, please. We've had noise questions from members of the community, and I just want to emphasize that from the closest resident or the farthest resident, you will not hear a thing from our facility once it's up and operating. If you were 15 feet away, you might hear a low hum, but there is not going to be any noise coming from our facility that any resident in Stonebridge will hear. And it's fully compliant with the Poway noise regulations, but nothing will be able to be heard at any time of day or night. We talked about boring under Beeler Creek and Stonebridge Parkway. Beeler Creek as well will be jack and bore to eliminate any potential environmental issues, and the same thing for Stonebridge, like I discussed earlier. I kind of briefly touched on maintenance of the emergency access routes, and we've submitted a letter to the San Diego Deputy Chief and Fire Marshal committing to do this, as we have offered to the Stonebridge Board of Directors as well. Next slide, please. Just to make sure everybody knows what the emergency egress routes are, these are the existing access roads that were put in when the community was built. And so our commitment is to maintain the access roads from a brush perspective to ensure that there's no problems getting through should there ever be an emergency. And there's been a question raised as to why the change of heart from the San Diego folks. And I can't say why the police department, we haven't talked to the police department, but we have definitely talked to the fire department, and they are very eager to facilitate this. And the folks in Poway were also agreeable to make this happen. So regardless, we're trying to provide benefits of an emergency egress across the Beeler Creek through the dam that is there, and then up the road, which is also a 2-lane road paved road that I've been up and down with my car many times. Next slide, please. So really quickly, and we can dive into this a lot deeper, but from a fire safety perspective, the differences in the technology versus other incidents that have been in the press are significantly. One main issue is it's a change in technology, and Tesla about a year and a half ago made the commitment to change technology from previous versions and previous battery chemistries. Previously, they were using, among other things, nickel, manganese, cobalt technology, but they made the switch to lithium iron phosphate just because it's a much safer battery chemistry. And so our plan is to use the Tesla Megapack 2XL, and that is the battery product, the lithium iron phosphate technology that is extremely safe. And batteries are regulated by a lot of different standards and codes, fire protection agencies, and electrical engineering, and universal UL. I'm drawing a blank. Underwriters Laboratory. Sorry, Underwriters Laboratory has several tests that they go through that all the battery manufacturers need to comply with, and one in particular is the 9540A test protocol, which is basically see what happens when a battery is forced to catch on fire and what happens to surrounding battery units. In this case, when the Tesla Megapack 2XL was tested, the batteries do not catch on fire even when they're forced to overheat to try to catch on fire. So previous versions would have caught on fire and not spread to other units. The current version that we're planning to use here, that we will use here, and are hopefully coming in several months to the facility, will not catch fire based on overheating. And that's really exciting. And we're very proud of the fact that we're using something that we don't think there will be a problem for the community. I want to just emphasize that the Poway Fire Department has been extremely engaged, and more so engaged than any other fire department that we've been working with. And we've got 8 projects throughout the state of California that we've been developing with Arribon, and they've got several projects that are up in operation and others in construction. But this is something that the Poway Fire Department has been extremely engaged in our development efforts. Next slide, please. I want to kind of go through the underground transmission route and the part that's probably most impactful, if you call it, from a community standpoint, just because it's going across your land or planned to go across your land. So what you can see is the project site up in the north, and then we've got the yellow line going through all the way to the Sycamore Canyon substation on the Miramar base. And there's 2 little blue areas that are jack and bore boring underneath the creek and Stonebridge Parkway. Next slide, please. So the first thing when we start our construction, after we survey and make sure we understand where all the utilities are, is to do some trenching, and we'll create a trench. It'll be easier in general going through the non-paved areas. Most of what we're crossing is non-paved, it's just dirt. And so we'll be digging something about this size, and this is a proper width. Next slide, please. And this is what it kind of looks like. It's about a 5-foot deep trench, 1.5 feet wide. It's got 1 bank of conductors in a line that will be supported by a support structure. It's a plastic support structure that holds the conductors and the conduits. What you're seeing is the conduits that the conductor wire will be ultimately pulled through. It's totally encased in concrete and slurry on top, and then it's backfilled with native material and will eventually look like it looks today. You can see just a picture through it on the right-hand side. That's a little wider than this will be, but that's the picture showing a double set of transmission lines. Next slide, please. Okay, from a trench construction, this again is a city street. but it's basically the similar looking process. On the right-hand side, you can see that that's what it's going to look like when it's done. That's what it looks like today. And ultimately, from a construction standpoint, this is about a 200-foot a day of construction work. Where they trench it, they'll put their spacers in, they'll put the conduit in, they'll backfill it with concrete, and that'll kind of continue down the process. It'll be about, I think, 1,800 feet going across Green Valley Court where that utility corridor is. So that's a 9 or 10 day process of work during the day only that will be in place. And during this time, I want to emphasize that Green Valley Court utility corridor, it will be open for walkers. There'll be enough space to get a car down there. But if you walk your dog or run down there, or ride your bike, whatever, that'll still be open, and you can come and check on the construction progress or do your daily constitutional, whatever it is, to make sure that will not be closed, and you'll still have access to that during the construction period. Next slide, please. Every 2,000 feet or less, because we have 2,000-foot spools, is how long they make these transmission lines. There's a need for a vault. So there's going to be a vault where they splice underground these transmission lines, and you can just see these are concrete vaults that will be lowered into the ground. And then when the wires are put in after everything is complete, they will splice them, and there'll be a large steel door on top, or large enough to get in. It's not as large as these vaults, but at least it'll be there. And otherwise, that's all you will ever see from the facility. Next slide, please. So we talked about the blue areas on the slide a few times before, showing the overall outline. And so what we're using is jack and bore technology. And this is the safest and most assured way to not have any problems when we're boring through this type of area. And so what we do is dig both a boring pit and a receiving pit. And the boring pit's about 30 feet long and about 12 foot wide. And then at the other end of the bore will be a small receiving pit about 10 foot by 12 foot. And what we'll do is push this bore through the soil underground to make sure it's way underneath whatever we're going under. In the case of the Stonebridge Parkway, it'll be 30 or 40 feet down. And what happens here is that you see on the right-hand side, you've got the auger bit, and then you've got a casing, a steel pipe. And that basically is put in place, as you see on the left-hand side, pushed through, and auger kind of goes through and pulls soil back. And as this kind of continues to go forward, there'll be occasional times when we need to empty this area out because it's full of soil. So we'll take dump trucks off periodically, but slowly this will go through and get to the other side of the pit. What happens is, as this goes 20 feet forward, they'll lower another pipe in, weld it on, and continue the process to continue to go through until it reaches the end pit, the receiving pit. And this bore will have technology on it, so it knows exactly where it is all along the way. And this part of the process will take probably about 6 weeks or so to complete. And the bore from Stonebridge to the other side of the wetlands going up the hill, that's probably a six week process to get through that soil underneath there. And at the end of the bore, the bits will be removed, and spacers, similar to what we saw before with supporting the conduits we put in, and then another conduit that has holes in it will be put in to allow concrete to flow, to again fill it up so it remains in place and is surrounded by concrete. Next slide, please. Once we get through that, we can go kind of finish the rest of the way, and we're getting permission to work in Miramar. We've been through a process with Miramar for quite some time as well, but going up the hill will come from the top of the hill, from on the base, and work down to join up with the receiving pit there, and we'll trench up the hill and put our facilities in just like I showed you a little bit ago, going across the Green Valley Court, and the same basic process will happen going up the hill. You can see on the right-hand side, when it's done, it'll be restored and it'll look just like what it looks like today out there right now. This particular job, one of our contractors is doing a job in La Jolla, and they just took these pictures in the last couple of weeks. So a very recent job over in La Jolla. Next page, please. I want to talk a little bit about insurance, and we've had a lot of discussions over many months with about insurance and fire insurance and challenges that the Stonebridge residents are having with fire insurance, and we understand that, and actually thought that maybe we could have a significant benefit to Stonebridge residents by insurance, but by providing the emergency egress paths. And what we found out, I work with one of the #1 farmers agents in California as my home insurance and auto and everything else. And by the way, that's Klinkenbeard Insurance in Santee. If you want to reach out to them, Adam Klinkenbeard, and if you reach out through the website or email address, I'm happy to provide his contact information. But he thought, when I talked to him about this, that there would be significant benefits with the addition of the additional emergency egress. So preparing for this meeting, I kind of pressed him a little bit, and the community is going to want proof that this is really a benefit. So he did find homes that qualify for normal fire insurance, because what he ended up doing is going through and just at random taking homes and putting it through his computer to see if he could get regular fire insurance with the addition of the secondary emergency egress. So he did find homes that qualify, but not as many as he originally thought. But what he found during this process was that the largest challenge was brush. So what I've been learning about fire insurance is that brush is a key issue. Your proximity to brush that could catch on fire. If you're located on a canyon or a hillside, that's very challenging. The one way in, one way out location and defensible space is something that's just new. And I noticed that, at least on the Google Earth images, Stonebridge has a 100-foot defensible space all around it. That may be something that can be used to reclassify Stonebridge in the future. But at this point, I don't want to promise you. What I can promise you is that nearby industrial facilities, including our battery facility, are not a factor in residential insurance, and we're not going to have any impact on your ability to get insurance. Next slide, please. I've had questions about stormwater runoff in general, and so stormwater flows from Kirkham Way or out from our facility. It's caught in the detention basin, filtered, and going out into Kirkham Way. Eventually, that makes its way to Beeler Creek, and construction requirements mandate that we've got a proper erosion sediment controls in place that ensure that this is very safe runoff. It's runoff that would be from anywhere, just like what's next door or on the ground or on the highways or roads. In the extreme unlikely event of a fire, Tesla's recommendation is not to use water for the new lithium iron phosphate batteries. So they don't believe it's going to burn, but if it were to burn, they don't recommend using water. And even if they were to use water, or if the fire department decided they wanted to use water just to be sure, test results confirm that there's no hazardous runoff when they use water from burning megapack tests that they've done. Next slide, please. So just kind of where we've been and where we're hoping to go. So we started, I mentioned, February of 2022 with the Poway City Council pre-application meeting. And we came to the Stonebridge community in the neighborhood park on June 8th of 2022 and had some good discussion there. Prior to February 1st, when the Stonebridge Board of Directors had a meeting, we submitted a proposal to the board with an easement agreement and a proposal to try to work to negotiate an agreement to be able to cross the Stonebridge property. On February 28th, the city of Poway had a neighborhood open house, and some residents were in attendance there, and we got an opportunity to speak with them. And March 2nd, Scripps Ranch Community Planning Group had a meeting, and we presented there and were approved conditionally, assuming that the Stonebridge Board of Directors ultimately agrees to support us. And tonight we're having our community update with Stonebridge. And our hope is in the next couple of months, we'll be before the Poway City Council, as well as City of San Diego for approval for our respective permits in these various jurisdictions. Next slide, please. So from a community benefit standpoint, I think most people recognize the more reliable grid power with more and more renewables coming on the grid. Projects like these are necessary. And it's just a matter of projects like these. We've got 2 projects within the general San Diego area and downtown Barrio Logan, where we got unanimous approval from the Barrio Logan Community Planning Group, and then ultimately the City Council in San Diego. And we worked hard with that community planning group and the community with a lot of outreach, and been trying to do that here as well. So I just want to reiterate that we're here, we're not going anywhere. We want to communicate and ultimately get you comfortable that this is a good asset for the community. It's needed by the region, and it's good for Poway, and it's good for Stonebridge. We talked a lot about the secondary egress and how that has been approved by both fire departments in San Diego and Poway. Want to talk about secondary fire department access from Poway. When we were originally talking about this, we thought, well, maybe we can have the City of Poway Fire Department access Stonebridge more quickly through this route as well. But what we found out was that they needed a 20-foot wide roadway, and while it makes everything except for the bridge is 20-foot wide, the fact that this is a Army Corps of Engineer design bridge and regulated bridge, it makes it very challenging to go back and make changes to that. And ultimately, the city Poway said, we already have access through Beeler Canyon Road. Don't go down that path. So that's kind of where that stands at this point. My slightly engineering mind said we could do this easily, but when our folks looked at it, and they said this is not a simple proposition to get approved. So anyway, we committed to annual maintenance for the removal of brush on the emergency access and egress roads. And ultimately, we want to be a good community partner, and we're willing to do what it takes to make sure that we are a good community partner. We like to provide STEM education benefits to, I know there's a private school in the middle of Poway, and to be able to provide upper grades with STEM education benefits and help them as they're moving forward in their scholastic career. And other things that are important to the community. We want to hear more about that and what can we do to help out. But ultimately, we're asking for your support and want to continue the dialogue and answer questions as we can. Next slide, please. And that was the end of the presentation. As I mentioned, went through a lot of information on a high level, but we're happy to go into things deeper as we can.
Great. Thank you, Keith. Appreciate the presentation. And what we're going to do now, as promised, is move into the Q&A section of our presentation tonight. So we've received a fair number of questions that have been received in advance of this meeting, as well as in the Q&A button at the bottom there. So we'll be answering those questions that were received in advance of the meeting, as well as those received during the meeting. If you didn't submit a question in advance, you can still go ahead and put that into the Q&A box. Or if you're someone that would prefer to speak and ask a question, then what we would have you do is if you're joining by telephone, there's the raise hand button, or you can do that on your screen. There's a raise hand button, and then we will make the audio accessible to people as we call on people, so that so people can make their individual comments. So if you're joining by telephone, and some people are joining by telephone and not by computer, you would want to dial *9 to enter into the queue to ask a verbal question. And then when we call on you, it'll be *6 to unmute. And Emily Fan Michelson is going to be monitoring the Q&A box and reading questions out loud, and any of the repeat questions, because we sometimes get a lot of the same questions that people submit. We will consolidate those questions. I will also say, if you want to send additional questions to info@nighthawkenergystorage.com, then we will make sure that we respond to them, and those will get posted on the website in the Q&A section. And the last thing I'll say as we enter into the Q&A portion here is we definitely understand that there are people who are opposed to this project, and we respect your opinions. We are really hoping that people tonight who are calling in do have specific questions or concerns that we can address, versus just saying you don't like the project. Again, we understand that people have a variety of opinions, and our hope is that we can address all of those areas of concern and have a respectful dialogue tonight about the process. So with that, I will turn it over to Emily, and she'll start with the Q&A that we've received so far. So thank you.
Thanks, Derek. If we can go to the next slide. So these are all the questions that we had that were submitted in advance of the meeting. So we'll be reading those out loud, so everyone who are participating either by phone or on their computer can hear the question, and then going ahead and answering those questions. So the first question that we received was, in the project rendering section on your website, you have an elevation view page. Can you explain what the 35-foot tall lightning protection mast is?
Yes, I'll answer that, and at least the first couple of these questions, but then I'll try to let some of our other experts explain some of these questions and respond to some of these questions. But basically, a lightning protection mask is kind of what it sounds like. It protects against lightning. It's a lightning rod that's not uncommon in lots of different areas, but in this case, it's designed to protect electrical equipment from lightning storms. And in this case, we don't have a lot of lightning, but there is lightning, and certainly we've seen some this year. So it's just something that's a protection mechanism to ensure that the lightning does not strike our equipment and cause damage to the electrical controls mostly. Additionally, lightning masts are helpful, and they work for an area, a given area. And in this case, it could be helpful to not have lightning strike the nearby dirt and brush and cause a fire that way. So striking a lightning rod and going straight to ground is what you want to have happen in case there's a lightning storm.
Thank you. Go to the next slide, next question. So question number 2 was, can you give exact details explaining about how and how often Nighthawk will clean and maintain Stonebridge emergency access routes?
I'll do my best to answer that, although I don't have a great answer. The reality is we don't know, but what I can tell you is what we expect to do is contract with a landscape contractor who can maintain the brush for us. And my estimation is that would happen once a year in the springtime, but years like this, when we've had so much rain, and I don't know what the growth will be and whether it needs to be done more than once during a year. But my expectation is that would be a one time per year cleaning up the brush to make sure it's very passable before, as the growing season starts, before the fire season.
Thank you. Next slide. So question number 3 we received, residents were told in 2020 that we were not able to use these emergency access routes anymore, and only emergency personnel can use them. Has the San Diego Police Department changed their minds and will now allow residents to use these roads?
I can't speak for the San Diego Police Department. What I can tell you is that the fire department is very excited about making this a another way out for the community, and they are and seem to be incented to want to make this happen and been very supportive of our offer to try to make this an emergency egress for the Stonebridge residents. And as I mentioned before, both San Diego and Poway have agreed to this, and we have also committed, maybe back for the last question, we've committed to maintaining those access road from a brush standpoint to make sure they're passable, and sent a letter to the San Diego Fire Department to commit to that as well.
Thank you. Next slide. The fourth question we received it's a kind of three-part question. Will the newly constructed proposed emergency egress route be a paved road that a typical sedan car can drive up? Second part of it is this a 2-lane road? The third part, how will residents get access to a key to unlock the unmanned gate?
I'll answer the easy parts of this, and I'll turn it over to Michael Huff to try to answer the third part of this. But the first question is, yes, the road up what we call the granite site, Payne Street to Poway, is a paved road. That's 2-lane road that I mentioned before. I've driven up and down that road several times. Typical cars can get up that no problem. And it is large enough that I've passed dump trucks going down or going up many times. So that's very passable and very drivable. And as far as how residents get access to a key and the logistics for that, I'll try to let Michael address this question, if that's okay.
Sure. Thank you, Keith. Mike Huff, I'm the director of DUDEC's Fire Protection Planning Team. And the thing with emergency access roads is that they're fitted with Knox locks. Knox is a brand of a lock. Law enforcement and fire agencies have the keys to those. They typically wouldn't want residents to have full access to a road like this. In a wildfire event, they would want to manage, at their discretion when the road is used and by whom it's used, because if residents were using it without direction, it's possible they could drive into a dangerous situation. We have a very similar project in city of San Diego. San Diego has been full of these types of communities where you have one way in, one way out. And they are very, very excited about the possibility of additional access. In an evacuation, options are everything. So providing another way in and out helps them manage an evacuation event. So they would be the ones to control that access. And for an example, if you're worried that they won't have somebody there when it's needed, a recent fire, the Lilac fire up in North County, they were able to muster 50 deputies within a very short period of time, and they pulled in 116 additional both deputies and other officials who were doing things like intersection control, opening gates, so they can muster a very big resource and put them where they need them. So that's kind of how that would work.
Thank you. And go to the next slide. So the fifth question we received is, the project is 1,200 feet from the Costco gas station. Will this cause an explosion of the gas tanks at Costco?
The quick answer, Emily and everyone, is no. This will not cause an explosion of the gas tanks at Costco. Under no credible scenario would our facility cause any kind of concern like that.
Okay, we go to the next slide. This is a little bit of a longer one. The question number 6 is, so it's about Stonebridge fire insurance. Those residents have been dropped coverage, increased premiums. Battery facility next to Costco gas station is like salt to injury. Will they compensate for homeowners insurance increases starting the operation of the facility? And then another question, if the home becomes uninsurable due to elevated fire risk from it, basically a giant fire igniter next to a large gas station just across the canyon. How can they help?
Well, I think we kind of have talked a little bit about this, but the bottom line is that anyone's home is not going to become insurable due to elevated fire risk from our facility. That's just not going to happen, and that's not a factor in insurability from a fire insurance standpoint. And we also talked about the battery facility next to Costco gas station is not going to cause any problems with the Costco gas station. And we don't expect our facility to have any problems by itself as well. So I think the answer is we're not going to have any impacts to residents in fire insurance or increased premiums. The only possible thing that we can do is help it if we have a secondary emergency egress that helps matters from an insurance standpoint.
All right, next slide, please. It says in addition to the residents, there's also a private school in Stonebridge with hundreds of kids from preschoolers to 8th graders. Does the evacuation plan cover these kids and families?
Whatever happens during an evacuation route, certainly they're important residents and users of the Stonebridge community. So I believe any evacuation plan that would be put in place would cover the school for certain.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Derek, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, so let's look over here. We've got the Q&A box. We have questions that are coming in. For those of you that are just either just joining us or want to ask a question, you can go ahead and type a question into the Q&A box. I see that we have a lot of them there, or you can raise your hand to enter into the queue for a verbal question. I only see one hand raised so far. So if you do want to do that, please go ahead and raise your, okay, there we go. I see other hands. Do we want to move to an audio question? Right now we have 2 hands that are up, and then we can switch back over to the open Q&A. Does that sound okay? All right. So the first hand up is Scott Carhart. And so Scott, I'm going to click this and you should be allowed to speak to the group.
Hi, Derek. Yeah, my name is Scott Carhart, and I will start off by first thanking you and Mr. Latham and Emily for hosting and entertaining the questions and concerns of the community. I'll say that it's more of a statement than it is a question. I think we first got interested in what's going on here walking down the parkway when we saw the notice of the meeting earlier in the month, or in February, I guess it was, for the access underneath Stonebridge Parkway. And so my husband attended the meeting in February, sat with Austin Silva, who has been a tough one to get an answer back from, because we have pressed him for more answers about what's going on here. And I appreciate and understand that you guys have been at this for a long time. I'm not going to apologize that we're late to the game. I think our concerns here are valid, and apparently they're shared by quite a few members of this community. We started a petition to oppose your project no more than 48 hours ago, and already we've got over 40% of the community who has signed on, and on change.org expressed their opposition to it as well. So I think there's something going on here, and I appreciate that you guys are spending a lot of time on this project, the design, the permits, start to finish. I can only imagine what you're up against, but I think you've got a whole bunch of members of this community who are tremendously concerned about the size of this facility that's going in right next to multi-million-dollar properties. And one of the questions I wrote to you there online is what other properties were considered? What other sites were considered that may have put this in a safer location than the one that you've selected here on Kirkham Way? The group absolutely supports clean energy. I think no one's going to fight the fact that a stable grid is a good grid, but the site selection is, we just read up on the fire not even a year ago up in the Bay Area, and those homes that were put in jeopardy from that fire were 4 miles away. We just saw from the diagram here tonight that, you've got some homes in our community that are half-mile away. Those folks were told to shelter in place and turn off their HVACs. These are real concerns for the community here. We can talk about how safe the new batteries are that Tesla is designing, the LFPs, but only time's going to tell. Only time will tell how safe it really is. And if there is a fire in that facility, if that facility gets built and there is a fire there, we're guinea pigs, and we're the ones who are going to have to deal with this, as far as the fire insurance is concerned and dealing with our health and all of that. So the question I had put you online there was, did you guys consider, were any other sites considered? And if so, what are they? Why were they rejected? Why is this facility right here so important? So I don't really have any specific questions about your the battery facility. It's all about this group strongly opposing the location altogether and asking that you guys work on finding another place to put this battery.
Okay, thank you, Scott. I'll let Keith address that, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I think from a location standpoint, Scott, we've been, well, first of all, the location is tying into the grid at this location at the Sycamore Canyon substation, effectively the end of the Sunrise Power Link. So where all renewables are coming into San Diego, this is a perfect location for a battery facility. From a specific site perspective, yes, we looked at a lot of different sites. We primarily spent a lot of time working with the US government and the Marines and trying to locate on their facility. And at the end of the day, I think they feel bad that they didn't say that they would do it, but they were just too busy and couldn't give any attention to us. So we looked elsewhere. We had another site that was closer to your residences down just on the edge of Beeler Canyon Road, a little bit further east of where we were. And that had problems from an environmental standpoint. It was closer to the community and was not nearly as good a site from a zoning perspective or proximity standpoint. And ultimately, we talked to the city of Poway and to Cal Fish and Game, and all of them said where we are now is the best site from a zoning and proximity standpoint, and makes the most sense. So that's how we ended up there. And yes, we did look at a lot of different areas in the region, and we looked further up on the hill. There just isn't any space available. And so we ended up where we are, and this is good.
All right. We're going to move to a question that came in through the Q&A section. Emily, do you want to take those, or would you like me to facilitate that?
Sure. So we're going to mostly try to hit every single question. I think some of them had already been addressed somewhat during the presentation, but I think people may have joined at different times. So I think for those, maybe we can just answer quickly, but in case people joined late, I want to make sure they can get that information. The first question that we received was, how is this project different than Moss Point?
I'll start that, then I'm going to turn that over to John to go into some details. But I think, as I mentioned earlier, it's different battery chemistry, and that's the main difference. It's still Tesla technology, but it is the latest technology that is is available, and the much safer technology that I'm not sure I mentioned earlier, but all the major battery manufacturers are switching over to LFP because of its safety. And I think Tesla was one of the first to do that and make that commitment a year and a half ago. John, can you speak more to that specifics?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Keith. Yeah, the Moss Landing project was built with Tesla Megapack version 1. Those version 1 use the lithium oxide and aluminum technology. That technology is mainly used in the vehicles, and so it is a much more energy dense. However, it is much more flammable in a heat producing situation. So when it does happen to have a failure, it does fail quite, it will start on fire. However, as Tesla has realized the technology, they realized that they needed to change and move to the LFP technology because of its inherent safety and because of its inherent significantly lower fire risk. During the fire testing, they actually conducted the Underwriters Laboratory test, which is the UL 9540A testing, which is a prescribed testing program for lithium-ion battery systems. This back maybe 5 years ago, Underwriters Laboratory realized that there were going to be issues with batteries, and they had seen small-scale battery fires in Korea and other places. And there was a move to create a standardized testing procedure for evaluating and determining safety in batteries. So Tesla conducted the tests with the supervision of the Underwriters Laboratory team, and no fire was observed from the battery during the testing. Additionally, after the Underwriters Laboratory testing, Tesla then went above and beyond and tested approximately 5 times as many cells as was necessary under the UL testing to try to incite a fire. Even then, they could not incite a fire. And what this involves is putting heaters inside the battery pack and heating these batteries up past their point where they begin to thermally decompose. And they could not start the pack on fire even under that circumstance. So they are very pleased with the technology and very pleased with the considerable, safety advance that these products have had, to the extent of they've, for all intents and purposes, stopped producing the Megapack 1, and all of their production is going to be lithium iron phosphate battery systems that they deploy in the United States and the world. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
All right, we can go to our next question. You're asked if you can provide any details about the easement or the status of the easement.
The easement, I mentioned that we had made a proposal to the board of directors back in January ahead of their February 1 board meeting, and I do not have further details on the status of that. We basically committed to several things in our proposal. It included some monetary compensation as well as a commitment to ensure that we kept the brush managed along the access routes, and other than that, requested to have the easement and start negotiating the easement. But at this point, we don't have any details, and unfortunately haven't had a response since that time.
All right, next question. How does boring under they put in some SBPKWY impact drainage, earthquake safety, and potential for sinkholes?
I was figuring out Stonebridge Parkway Emily, could you say that one more time, please?
Oh, sure. Thank you. How does boring under Stonebridge Parkway impact drainage, earthquake safety, and potential for sinkholes?
I don't think it will at all, and I'll turn that over to John. I think is probably the best technical person to answer that as well, but the answer is probably not. John?
Yeah, I guess as Keith mentioned in the presentation, the decision was to use jack and bore technology instead of directional boring, because when you jack and bore, you're essentially pushing the pipe through the ground and excavating the earth along with the as you push the pipe. And so the pipe supports the earth around it, thusly preventing any cave-ins, sinkholes, or other things to be propagated by it. Unlike which directional boring does, because directional boring actually excavates an area around the pipe and allows the pipe to slide through the actual excavated hole in the ground, which then allows for opportunities for cave-ins, sinkholes, and other aspects of the things to happen. So the reason why we picked jack and bore technology is there's very little what they call frack out or problems with the ground and the earth around it. So it allows us to have the best of both worlds for the technology, the safety, the reliability of the ground, and the system as a whole.
Thanks, John. The next question we received was a question asking if the site is the primary source of fire. Basically, if there is a fire at the site, does a fire escape through the project site truly make sense?
I think in that unlikely scenario, no, that would not make any sense. You would only be going the other way. But again, we don't expect the site to be a fire, and this is an option for the community should there be a fire in the area. It's another source of egress should there be a fire, and that's where that would be used. But yes, if there were a site, a fire in Poway or a fire on our sites, then no, that would not be the way of egress.
Thank you.
I'm going to switch us over since we have some hands that are raised, and we'll take a question. So Victoria, I'm going to turn on your microphone to go ahead and speak. So you should be able to speak now.
Thanks so much, Derek. I'm Victoria Labruzzo. I'm actually the chair of the Scripps Ranch Planning Group. And I want to thank your company for coming by, not just once, but twice to the planning group. And this is really just a comment out to the Stonebridge residents. We have you guys come by twice. Scripps Ranch Planning Group is in need of having residents from Stonebridge to represent your community at the Scripps Ranch Planning Group. If you're not familiar with Scripps Ranch Planning Group, where we have an article in the Scripps Ranch newsletter each month that gives you an idea of what we do, but this is specifically what we do. We talk about land use and housing issues throughout the community of Scripps Ranch. Unfortunately, your community has no representation on our board. So I am taking this opportunity for a shameless plug. I apologize to you guys, but we rarely get an opportunity to talk to a community of people that are involved in Scripps Ranch like this. And I did want to just encourage you. At the last meeting, we had one resident from Stonebridge come out and listen to Keith and his presentation at that time. And I just really want to encourage your group, your homeowners association, those that are really interested in the land use and housing to have a seat on the board. We do have available seats, and in particular, the city of San Diego wants us to get some Stonebridge residents in there. So that's all I had to say, and just thanking these guys. They have gone above and beyond and presented to our group multiple times, and we appreciate everything they've been doing. And if anybody has questions for the Scripps Ranch Planning Group, you can reach me at the Scripps Ranch, SRPG chair at scripsranch.org. And we also did vote on this, as they mentioned, and we voted on it with an HOA approval as a contingency. So if you have specific detailed questions you want to know from us, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Victoria. I appreciate it. We're going to take another question. Larry Benson, I'm turning on your microphone, so feel free to speak.
Yeah, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
You can ignore my typed question now, so I'll frame it all into to this one. I really have two concerns or issues. It's nice to always have another emergency egress, but quite honestly, this subdivision has been in need of a second way out, not just an unlock the gate, but a second way out, permanent way out. I moved here in 2011, so I've only heard it from hearsay that there was originally a planned second road out of here, but it never materialized for whatever reason. So perhaps if this group were really interested in putting this this group of people to in what I view as a little bit of an increased risk and during the construction and everything else, perhaps they'd be willing to put in some kind of permanent road that gets us in and out of here. My number two question or issue is around the insurance. It's easy for the gentleman to state that, you know, he doesn't believe our insurance rates are either going to go up or will be canceled. But quite honestly, I've had to change insurances 3 times in the last 3 years for either extremely higher rate increases or the fact the company just didn't want to insure us anymore. And these are name brand insurance companies who weren't fly by nights. So to say that insurance either wouldn't go up or perhaps be canceled because they view that as a higher fire risk is easy for somebody to say, but once it happens, they've got their facility in and we're left holding the bag. That's it.
Yeah, great. Okay. Thank you, Larry. I appreciate that. I'll let Keith respond.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can respond to the first issue very well, Larry, and appreciate the desire for a permanent road. I'm not sure how even one goes about getting a permanent road put in and put on the books and permitted and built and what that would cost. I just don't have any idea, and so I really can't speak to that. From an insurance rate standpoint, I understand, and I just moved and I was looking at a place in Poway that was a one-way in, one-way out property on the hill. I understand the California fair plan and how that works. But so I completely understand where the insurance market is and what I'm paying for my house now versus what I was paying several years ago is crazy. But the point of it is our facility is not going to impact your ability to get fire insurance. It's brush, it's being on a hillside, it's one way in, one way out, and maybe now defensible space. So those are the issues that go into a computer program and say, yes, you can be insured under normal fire insurance, or no, you can't, and you have to go to the California Fair Plan. So I think, again, I'm happy to pass on my insurance broker's information for you to talk to. I'm sure you've talked to many brokers as you've struggled with this process over the last several years, and I get it, but I'm not sure that we're going to have an impact on that.
Okay, we're going to take one more hand up and then switch back to some of the Q&As that are in the box, and then we'll go back and forth here. So Bob Ilko, I'm going to unmute you here, and you should be able to speak now.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. The issue of Stonebridge and the entitlement as to the one way in, one way out, as things come around, things haven't changed. McMillan, when it first asked to build Stonebridge, was going to use the Granite Construction Road, Payne Road, as their main entrance and exit out of Stonebridge. The city of Poway, for various reasons, said not only no, but hell no, which forced the city of San Diego to have the only access route being Pomerode Road at Stonebridge Parkway. So to make a permanent road is impossible because the city of Poway isn't going to provide that. That now that the grounded construction has that dam that's limited in width, that will not be possible. We welcome all concerns and issues. We've been working with the various members of the community over the last year and a half. We will continue to do so. We asked tonight to bring the various experts to answer the questions that each of you have. We are here to listen and provide the resources necessary so that there will be a good, well-informed decision by the decision makers in the community as to whether or not this project should or could go forward. So if you have received emails from the SRCA, thank you. If not, you can email me at president@scripturange.org to be put on the list. We have a development interest list, as we do for every project, and I have about 500 people on the interest list for Nighthawk. Thank you and good night. Always here to answer questions.
Great. Thank you, Bob. I appreciate your comments. Okay, we're going to switch back over to the open Q&A on there, and then we'll go back to hands here in just a second as well. So Emily, back to you.
Right, so the next question we have is about views basically from Stonebridge. They're asking about with the construction site sitting about 60 feet above Stonebridge and then a 40-foot structure above that. That's 100 feet higher. Will that be visible from Stonebridge?
Yeah, the answer to that question, Emily and everyone, is that when we grade the site and it's coming out from Kirkham Way back towards Stonebridge, it's effectively going to be graded. So right now the mountain kind of goes like this, right? I don't know if you can see my hand very well, but it kind of looks like a mountain just coming off of Kirkham Way. And what we're going to do is basically flatten that out and make it kind of go up a little bit as we go towards Stonebridge. So it's going to be raised in elevation, Stonebridge, and effectively graded so that it's up in the air even higher. On your end, it's going to have a wall around it, and it's really going to be very difficult to see unless you are way far away, and then it's going to be difficult to see because of its distance. So I think the reality is we've got some pictures and you'll be able to zoom in on them. And while they're not the greatest thing for seeing, you're not going to be able to see this very well, if at all, depending on your location. If you're down closer to the bottom elevation, it will not be seen because of the way the facility is kind of sloping up towards Stonebridge.
Thank you, Keith. The next question, I think this was addressed in the presentation, but this person may not have gotten to hear that part if they joined a little bit late. But why not build the project right next to the SDG&E station?
Yeah, that's a great question. That it was actually, I think, in maybe Scott's first question, or somebody did ask that question. I addressed it then, but it was we tried long and hard to build it on Miramar base and probably worked with them a couple of years trying to do something and just could not get their attention. And unfortunately, that never happened. We could not work through the process with the base to make anything happen. That is the logical place for it, and we did try, I promise you.
Okay, thank you. So next question. It was mentioned that the life of the station and the batteries is 20 years. what happens to the station after 20 years? Is it going to be removed?
It will be removed following its contract, and it'll be removed. And it'll basically go back to a pad, and I just want to kind of let everybody know that this is being zoned light industrial. There were originally 15 acres across Kirkham Way that has been zoned light industrial in the general plan and specific plan when the business park was put in the 80s. And so there'll always be pads there for some sort of light industrial commercial facility. But when our facility is done and its life is over, it'll be returned to a level pad. And John, I don't know if I can call on you to answer any more specifics, but we'll be effectively tearing out the foundations and putting it back to basically a level pad and with nothing on it.
Yeah, Keith, happy to. After the site is, reaches its useful life, it will be decommissioned. The equipment will be hauled off and recycled. And exactly as Keith noted, the concrete pads will be crushed, and the pad will be leased to a light industrial manufacturer for them to build a building there. That's the next logical step after the project is completed.
Thank you. The next question we have in the box.
And maybe
Oh,
Emily, I'll just clarify that that's ultimately up to the landowner, what he does with the property. But as John said, likely it would be some other industrial facility of some sort, light industrial manufacturer, distribution, or whatever's around 20 years from now. That would be the logical progression, but that'd be out of our hands. We're operating via lease.
Thank you for that clarification. The next question we received was, will there be any fumes or vapor emitted from the facility during normal operations?
Absolutely none is my response, but I'd like to ask Greg Chittick if he would respond to that more fulsomely. And Greg, you're on mute there.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Keith. Greg Chittick with MRS Environmental. I'm an engineer, worked on the hazard assessment for the project, and no emissions during any normal operations. Only under the low probability of an upset condition, as Keith had discussed in his presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you. The next question was, has any existing site been using Tesla MP2XL batteries?
I think that's a good question for John, if he knows the answer to that.
The MP2XL is a specific type of battery that is designed for utility scale storage systems. And it utilizes what's called Megapack 2 battery system. And the Megapack 2s, which are slightly smaller units, have been deployed. I believe it's on the order of 15 megawatt hours throughout the world. I believe there's some in Hawaii, some number of other places. Essentially, in 2023, Tesla expects to double its fleet of batteries, all of which being lithium iron phosphate, which is the technology we've been discussing. Even previously, over 50% of their fleet, of their 15 megawatt hours, was lithium iron phosphate. So the Megapack 1 technology was actually phased out fairly quickly after it was initially deployed, when they began working with CATL, which is a very large battery manufacturer, a very high quality battery manufacturer, to provide the enhanced safety cells, and they redesigned their system accordingly.
Hey, John, one question on that. You indicated megawatt hours. That doesn't seem like a lot of batteries. Did I catch that right? Or
Sorry, 15 gigawatt hours, excuse me. Yeah, 15 gigawatt hours. You're correct, Keith. Yeah, their initial fleet prior to 2022 was about 15 gigawatt hours. They expect to double that in 2023 now. But again, prior to that, the 15 gigawatt hours was more than half of that was LFP even prior to the current MP2XL configuration.
Thanks, John.
All right.
All right, next question is, what sort of thermal cutoff is used?
I think that might mean operational cutoff. I'll defer that to John if he knows how to answer that.
Yeah, there are thermal sensors and thermal systems inside of each megapack. And there are many layers of thermal protection for these batteries. So obviously they're designed to handle the heat inside the battery itself and to be able to dissipate that efficiently and effectively. I want to say it's on the order of about 50 degrees Celsius becomes the battery cutoff in terms of operational. And then they can cut off a section of the battery. They don't actually have to cut the entire battery pack itself off when it's even when it's in operation. Because there are numbers of sensors throughout the entire system in terms of they monitor all the way down to every single individual cell in every pack. So they track voltage, they track a number of key parameters. So when something's happening, people know it and they're able to shut it down preemptively, which is a different configuration than the Megapack 1 itself as well.
All right, thank you, John. Next.
All right, next question. There's a question about the size, basically compared this site to the Barrio Logan project site.
The
Yes.
Barrio Logan project site was about 4 acres, not quite 4 acres, and it's right at 27th and Main Street. And we would have liked to had a larger site, but it wasn't available. And so what we have in Barrio Logan is a 200 megawatt, 2-hour battery that is getting ready to go to start construction in Barrio Logan. But we would have liked to have a couple more acres to do a full 200 megawatt, 4-hour battery like we're doing here, which is 304 hours.
All right, thank you. I'm just looking through. We're just trying to, there's some duplicate questions, so just trying to prioritize ones that haven't been already asked and answered previously. Let's see. We had another question that said, you mentioned this was a new model of battery. Are there any sites up and running using the lithium iron phosphate batteries?
I think that's what
Yes.
John was just working on. So go ahead, John.
Yeah. Approximately 50% of their current existing fleet of 15 gigawatt hours of projects is using these exact battery cells manufactured by CATL. And they expect a 50% plus increase in the total deployed fleet in 2023 of these same lithium iron phosphate cells.
Thank you. Same thing, just looking through to see if there's any questions that haven't already been asked and answered previously. We had a question, I think just trying to clarify, would there be any compensation be given to Stonebridge neighborhood for the use of their easement?
Yes, we plan on compensating the Stonebridge community for their easement. We did put a placeholder number in our offer to Poway and are looking forward to a response to be able to negotiate what makes sense for all parties.
Thank you. And looking through to see if any questions haven't already been answered. We had another question about let's see. Asking whether the energy from, basically the question is, does the energy from these batteries benefit the immediate surrounding community in the event of blackouts? Or does it get fed into different parts of the state?
Yeah, the batteries is a question we get a lot, and the batteries will benefit the region. It's going into the bulk transmission system at the Sycamore Canyon substation, and the electricity will flow out from there. Being nearby to this area, the whole immediate region will benefit from being close to the substation as the transmission and distribution kind of feed out from there. It won't go far, it'll stay local and it'll provide the benefits to the immediate region that surrounds this area.
Thank you, Keith. Derek, I'm still looking through to see if there's any questions that haven't been answered previously. Did you want to switch to anyone on the phone?
We can switch to on the phone. And I believe that the folks I see on the phone have also submitted questions through the Q&A too. So I would just ask if we've already responded to your question. Just, please acknowledge that. And if not, then feel free to ask an additional question. So I'm going to start first with Julie. And Julie, I'm going to unmute you and go ahead and feel free to ask your question.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I have several questions. You did answer that I just want to find out what was the reason for denial while why the Miramar station got denied.
And the other sites previously chosen.
And the other sites got previously chosen.
The bottom line is working with the US government, as you may imagine, is challenging at best. And we lobbied and tried and did everything we could to talk to the Miramar base, and ultimately never got their attention enough to be able to work through the long-term lease there. So we like I mentioned before, we tried very hard to work with the base to get access to their facility, and it just never materialized.
And what about the other sites?
The other site I mentioned, we had a site that was closer to Stonebridge along Beeler Canyon Road, just a little bit east of us, but that had environmental challenges and was closer to Stonebridge. And ultimately, the city of Poway and Cal Department of Fish and Game said, we recommend you go to the Granite site where we are currently located now.
How about, do you have a response from the Army Corps of Engineers in regards to this project, since they seem to be controlling that part of the area?
No, we're avoiding impacts to anything that's working with the Army Corps of Engineers and waterways and things like that.
The reason of?
And for the reason of?
Because it's a very challenging process to work with the Army Corps of Engineers.
Okay, do you have any statement from the environmental group in regards to disturbance of the habitat? I mean, I'm sure the Beaver Canyon is full of,
We're also on a preserve.
it's a preserve and it's full of wildlife.
Yes, ma'am, and we're working through that. We do have an environmental report that we created, and that's part of our permitting process that's being evaluated.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie. All right, next is going to be Larry Gertzer. I'm going to let you speak now here. So you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, hi. I have a couple of questions. Number one, how many physicians you have on board and what kind of research was done? Because lithium is very heavy metal and it's, as far as I know, destroys nervous system, especially in the long run. Number two question, why everything, whatever you said, is covered heavily in a concrete? If it's not dangerous for people, not dangerous for environment, why it's so covered heavily? I live near Chernobyl, and government, I'm sorry, government promises a lot, and you know what's happening. And basically, what questions I heard, my opinion is somebody put this question because majority of people who involved in this project, I mean, running against, they're not engineers. So basically, my opinion, all these questions prepared by you, and you answer your questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Keith, do you want to?
I can't answer the first part of that. The second part of being covered in concrete, I can answer, and it's just from a safety perspective, so no one would cut into a transmission line accidentally and cause power issues or worst case fire. And it's just from a safety perspective, from ensuring nothing happens. And that's why the transmission lines are covered in concrete. I'm not sure, John, if you or anyone else can respond to the first part of that.
Yeah, I guess, Keith, let me jump to the first part of actually the woman's question previously. Actually, you know, the construction, and when we talk about that, the nature preserve up through Beaver Canyon, we can only do construction on that area during certain periods of time when the nesting birds and other things are not present there. So this timing has already been taken into account during our construction schedule and planning. So we've been working closely with biologists and other people to make sure these actions are coordinated. The second thing is for the batteries and lithium, there is no free lithium in the battery whatsoever. It is in there as a lithium compound. It's lithium oxide, and it is an electrolyte. It is not a free substance in any way, shape, or form. Basically, it's several drops of this of lithium oxide in there. Majority of it is phosphate, iron oxides, and other materials, but there is no free metallic lithium in these batteries whatsoever. I guess I just want to stress that because, and then for the underground transmission line, yes, Keith, you're 100% correct with a safety factor on, you know, when we bury these lines in concrete, it's a protection. It's to prevent incidental contact or, you know, even, you know, malicious contact with the wires. And also it's a thermal factor to prevent the wires from overheating and other things like that. So it's to make sure that everything stays safe and everything stays efficient and allows the power to be transmitted easily and effectively with no impact to the surrounding community. I mean, after it's buried, you'll never know it's there. So thank you.
Okay.
John?
Sorry. Let's go to another. We have a lot. I just to know we still have a lot of hands up and quite a few questions too. So we're trying to get through this as much as possible. Let me go to Tony Garcia. Tony, I'm unmuting your microphone now, so you should be able to talk.
Okay, am I still muted or am I unmuted?
Nope, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So I did write in my questions. I noticed my first one wasn't answered, but maybe you haven't got to it because you did get to the second question I asked. So I do want to make sure my first question is addressed, and that is, we've heard a lot from your group about these new Tesla batteries and trying to get them to burn and how many tests are being done and over and over and over. But nobody has really shown us any evidence of the test. There's no video footage of these tests. There's no documentation of these tests. So just to kind of play devil's advocate here and be the skeptic in the room, is do you guys even have these tests that you can show the community that they did try to burn these batteries or get these batteries to burn down and it didn't happen? Do you guys have test results that you can actually show us?
I believe we have test results, and I believe we have shown them to the fire department. And that's one way to find out about this, Tony. And typically Tesla does not give these without a non-disclosure agreement, and whether we could sign that with you to give you that information, I don't know. Maybe John or Matt might know the answer to that, but yes, we have shown these to fire departments and they have reviewed them.
All right. Thank you. We're gonna take
maybe,
Mark.
hey,
Yeah.
hey, Derek. So
Mhm.
maybe a suggestion would be to talk with Andy Loperina at the fire department in Poway and get his take on the test results, because he has had a chance to review these.
Right. All right. So Marty, I'm unmuting you and you should be able to speak now. So there you go. Are you there, Marty, Emmanuel? All right. I'm not. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not hearing from Marty. So let's switch to Lori. Lori, I'm turning your mic on. Go ahead, Lori. Just unmute yourself.
Okay.
Thanks.
I would like to go back to the environmental issues. Beeler Canyon is a critical wildlife linkage through Sabre Springs and Los Penasquitos with wetlands. And it's a wildlife corridor. And I wanted to know about what types of, you said approval from environmental agencies. I would like to know if you are going through an environmental impact report through the state of California for this, or what type of agencies are you talking to for environmental studies?
We're talking primarily for our transmission line that goes from across the city of San Diego. We're talking to the city of San Diego and their environmental folks. And that's going, we've done, or I should say we performed biological studies of all this. I will say, Lori, that one of the reasons why we did not select the site that was closer to Stonebridge and had environmental challenges was because of the wildlife corridor that the state agencies were concerned about. So we were working with primarily Cal Fish and Game and U.S. Fish and Wildlife at the time, and had several conversations with them about the wildlife corridor and the fact that we were kind of in the middle of that with that other site, and that they pointed us to this particular project site where we are right now.
So you are saying that California Fish and Wildlife gave you a go-ahead?
They basically told us this was a site that we should consider before we were located.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Lori. All right, Marty, I'm gonna try you again here. If you unmute your,
Hi.
there you go. There you go.
I'm not Marty. I'm using my husband's computer. My name is Monica Emanuel.
Okay. Hi,
I
Monica.
have a few questions, but I'll try to limit it to just a couple. What happens when the lithium iron phosphate burns? I know you addressed runoff into the water, but what about airborne fumes and the toxicity levels there? And what happens if water is put on them to extinguish them? I know it's not encouraged, but what happens in regards to producing steam and chemical fumes?
Okay, those are good questions, Monica, that I don't have a great answer for, but I will turn it over to Greg Chittick, who should hopefully be able to give you a good answer.
Thank you, Monica. Greg Chittick with MRS Environmental Engineer. We performed the hazard assessment on it, and in the low probability that we do end up getting a thermal runaway and producing toxins, it will produce some toxic and flammable materials. One of the worst ones that traveled the farthest we found in doing dispersion modeling was carbon monoxide, which is a common pollutant associated with combustions, but they're also produced a number of other toxins, some hydrogen cyanides, hydrogen fluorides, but in relatively low enough concentrations that they would be dissipated below the safety levels, the IDLHs they're called, or the ERPG levels, within about 20 to 30 feet from the unit that's undergoing a thermal problem. So we did a lot of analysis at looking at what the rates of these materials might be coming off. And the worst that we found was that the hydrogen fluorides and the highly toxic materials were limited to about 20 to 30 feet. Carbon monoxide could stretch as far as 150 to 160 feet. But all of those would be essentially maintained on site and within the setbacks, which is an important part of ensuring that the facility is safe, is that you don't put it too close within a couple of 100 feet of homes or not. And those were the conclusions of our reports. So in the low probability that you get a thermal runaway, it can produce some toxic air emissions, but the impacts are relatively limited.
Thank you. Another question I have is
I'm sorry. One quick follow-up to Greg's comments is that most of those emissions are actually from the plastic that surround the batteries themselves. The decomposition of the batteries is basically it stays within the decomposition products, stay within the enclosure itself. So these are plastic compounds that are going airborne into these types of environments.
okay, so it's like any other plastic that might burn. So like toxic fluoride gases and or chlorides, similar to the recent train wreck that happened in the Midwest. Would there be any danger of something that extreme being emitted from these facilities should they create air pollution in the form of smoke?
There are none
John,
of those.
I'll take a shot at that real quick. There's no large inventory of things like you had at that train accident, for example, that could cause impacts for a large distance. This is all coming off of the combustion or the thermal degradation of the plastics and the wiring and such in the materials. And so there's not a large inventory that's suddenly released. And that's one of the reasons that we had relatively small impact distances. And John, I don't know if you had anything to add to that or.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it in the event of something like this happening and a thermal event happening, it's largely like a car fire more than anything else in terms of the byproducts and what's released and what's what's there. It's just it's essentially that same type of list of compounds.
Thank you. Got it. Another concern I had was the school. It does house a number of children through middle school, and that they do not have transportation. Parents drop their kids off, and obviously they come from out of the neighborhood as well as there are residents in the neighborhood. So if there was ever a need to evacuate those kids, how would parents be able to come in and pick up their child and then exit? I mean, this is just one of my concerns in regards to being a one-way in and one-way out, is we could potentially trap 1,000 kids at a school where their parents could not get to them. I'm just throwing that out for information for you guys to realize that that's another one of our concerns.
Thanks, Monica. That's a very good concern. And I think as the emergency response plans that the emergency responders put together, I think it's extremely important that they factor in the school in all of this. Thank you.
Okay, then I'll make this my last question, actually too. So this is a clean energy facility, and is it connect to the Sunrise Link where the clean energy is coming from them? And I mean, you probably won't know this, but theoretically, aren't we, the customers from SDG&E, paying to store energy? And how much of that energy is burned off or lost every day that needs to be replaced and paid for again? Just if you have any information on that, I would be interested.
Well, yes, this is connected to the substation where the Sunrise Power Link is coming to. So that answer is yes. From a SDG&E standpoint, you're not paying anything for this. This is contracted to Pacific Gas and Electric up north, and it's just an accounting game that the CPUC requires each utility to contract for so much capacity to maintain the reliability of the system. And in this case, it's contracted to Pacific Gas and Electric. So the benefits are local, but you're not paying for it because the PG&E is effectively paying for the capacity that they're buying from the project.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Thank you. Then the other thing, as far as the easement goes, I know you mentioned that there would be some sort of compensation to use that easement. Is it up to the Stonebridge residents whether or not that easement will be leased to you for use?
I'm not sure I can answer that for you, Monica.
Okay, I'll research elsewhere in regards to that. But thank you so much for doing this. We really appreciate it. I would like to encourage another meeting within the Stonebridge neighborhood and just have our neighbors meet again. Hopefully we can get more accomplished as a neighborhood one-on-one.
Thank you, Monica.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to turn on the microphone for Cindy Carosi. Sorry if I mispronounced your last name.
Kurose, close enough. Thank you.
Sure.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so I have two questions. The first one is primarily with regard to the emergency access roads. The way I heard it referred to about the fire departments getting excited about the additional egress in and out in the event of an emergency. I'm just a little confused because based on the maintenance, what I'm hearing is, and I know this requires a little bit more research on your part, but if we're thinking or you're thinking it's a landscape company coming out once a year, I don't understand like what really there is for the fire departments to have gotten excited about if there's not some big change happening to these roads. They're existing roads, there's not new paving happening to them. If this is something that the HOA or that the city could have maintained by clearing the brush back, are they just getting excited that you've offered to cover the bill for the brush maintenance? Is that really the gist of it?
I think Cindy, there's something going on where the fire departments are recognizing that there's a lot of one way in, one way out communities, and they're trying to reduce the number of communities. And we volunteered to find a way to allow the community access through brush clearing on the access roads to become emergency egress, and then go across the Beeler Creek through the dam and up Payne Street to to Poway. So I think that they seem to be incented to get rid of one way in, one way out communities from their lists. And regardless, they are very, my word is excited. I'm not going to say they're excited about it. That's just, it seems like they just really are supportive of this idea.
Well, so back in December of 2019, actually in the fall of 2019, we were all kind of blindsided when we found out that these emergency access roads were not going to be accessible by residents. And myself and a couple other residents, we kind of formed a little committee and just trying to get to the bottom of it. And we were getting a lot of mixed answers about whether or not we had access to them. We had codes to the padlocks to be able to get out, but then we were told pretty unequivocally, like, no, that's not for you. That's for the emergency personnel to use to get into the community. So we communicated with the fire department, with the sheriff's department, or actually, I don't remember if it was sheriff or PD that maintained the evacuation routes, but we got them to come together for a meeting. And we all met in December. And unfortunately, everything, the momentum was lost in that when COVID shut everything down that following March. But again, we were told at that meeting when we put everything together pretty unequivocally that those roads were not to be used by residents. So I don't know. I mean, this does sound like an encouraging concession, but I do just have some reservations until I hear from the fire departments themselves and from the police departments that they are, if push comes to shove and we need to use them, and they're the ones who make that call, and not because it's not going, because there's a fire in the brush and they don't want to let us through. Maybe you guys are maintaining it, but they still maintain that it's not for our use. So I just, like I said, I'm a little hesitant to completely accept that concession, regardless of you guys being willing to do it. I wonder if there's any sort of validation of the city approving it.
Well, what we can say is that Tony
Garcia,
the fire chief, assistant
no.
deputy fire chief is the one that came out and has responded and said that, yes, he is, again, my words, excited to see this come to fruition.
Okay.
So, and we can see if we can have a meeting with Tony and he can say yes or no, but he's been very positive throughout this process. And so unfortunately, and don't know what happened. I've heard from many people, Cindy, that it's been a absolutely no, unequivocally no from previously in 2019, 2020, but 2023 came around or late 2022 and Tony was definitely on board.
Okay. I'm curious, when you said you're not sure exactly what that would look like as far as the maintenance, if it's a landscape company once a year, as far as it being a concession to the approval of the easement, is there going to be like a dollar amount maximum that Nighthawk agrees to? We'll pay up to $5,000 a year, $10,000, whatever it may be, because if once a year doesn't end up being sufficient, I know what happens to my lawn if I have my gardener skip 1 week. If it ends up needing to be more than that, is there a cap that will be stated in that concession, or is it going to be more open-ended where it will remain passable? It will remain, 100 feet. The brush clearance will be 100 feet from the road, or, I'm just kind of curious what that's going to look like and what is potential recourse in the event it's not, if you guys don't hold up your end.
We have not stated a cap or anything. We just committed to, I think what we proposed was annual maintenance, but we're committed to making sure that is kept open. But other than that, at this point, we're willing to make sure that brush is maintained, and that's about the best I can tell you at this point, Cindy, until we get in there and see what happens when we cut it back once, and does it need to be cut back again or not? I just don't know.
Okay, and is that commitment for the life of the facility? Would it be for all 20 years?
It'd be for as long as we're operating, yes.
Okay. All right, and then speaking of operating, you mentioned PG&E. As far as the maintenance of the facility itself, is Nighthawk, Arrivon, PG&E, who is responsible for the maintenance of the facility? as you would imagine, there's some apprehension around PG&E maintaining
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah, it's not PG&E, it's Nighthawk, which is Arivon Energy, who is the largest owner and operator of renewable projects in the state of California. So they've got a good track record and they can speak to that if they'd like to, but that's the answer.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you, Cindy. All right. So I'm just noting that we are at the 2-hour mark now of the meeting, and we still have quite a few questions here that are flowing through. I see Bob Ilko has his hand up again, and I know Bob has a lot of the historical perspective on these roads and things, and I think I'll unmute him then, but then we can talk about kind of our go forward plan. And I want to make sure that, you know, that we're getting to questions, but I know that we can't expect people to be here all night long. So we want to figure out our next steps. So Bob, I'm unmuting you right now, and you can go ahead and speak if you can hear.
Thank you, Derek. One of the things that has come up is that the representative of St. Gregory the Great Church School is a longtime resident of Scripps Ranch and been on the planning group for about 20 years. He was the one that made the recommendation to approve the conditional use permit for the city of San Diego for this project to go forward. So St. Gregory, the church representative to the planning group, made the recommendation to go forward as to the city of San Diego side. The San Diego Fire Department and San Diego PD mutually agree by incident commanders where and when to evacuate. It is SDPD's job to do the actual evacuation, but the two incident commanders must agree as to when and where the evacuation does happen. As to the history of the precise plan, it was our understanding that the access evacuation routes would be used by residents, you know, with SDPD and San Diego Fire Department, but because the fire department and the city of San Diego have failed to maintain the brush clearances on these evacuation routes, the fire department has said that they do not want the access routes to be used for them as well as the public, which is why we asked Nighthawk to clean them up and maintain them probably every 6 months to keep the cost down, and do it at least twice a year is what we would anticipate. Part of the city of San Diego approval is a conditional use permit, and the planning group has made its recommendation that the brush management of these access roads be a condition of the city of San Diego as agreed to by Nighthawk going forward. Thank you for your time, everybody.
Thank you, Bob. And I apologize. I have wild dogs running amok around my house, so I apologize for the barking in the background. I'm just trying to, again, we keep getting more hands coming up, and we have different questions here. So I wanted to just reach out to the group about next steps and timing and what people are able to spend, because we absolutely want to make sure we're getting to everybody's questions and things. One are people frozen? Are you frozen, Keith?
I am.
Oh no, I thought you were.
Not frozen.
One option. We've got a couple of hands up. We could take this last group. I see 4 hands up. We could take the 4 hands, and then all the written questions we can work to make sure we're getting responses to them on the website, so that we're responding to what's coming through. Does that work for everybody, or? So All right, hearing nothing. Then let's just take a couple more. There's 4 hands up, so I'm just want to get through these. I would just ask if you've got a question, let's go ahead and we'll get through those, and then we'll make sure we're responding to the written questions that have been received as well. I appreciate everybody's time and patience through this process. So Dana, I see your hand is up. I'm unmuting your microphone, so feel free to speak.
Yes, thank you. I have 2 questions. The first question is regarding the egress road. Doesn't the city of Poway still have to approve this? Historically, Poway has said these roads are on private property and they would never approve a road for Stonebridge residents to use on an emergency basis. So I'd like to know what has changed.
I don't know what's changed, Dana, but when the Granite Construction did their restoration work, the permit they put in for was for emergency egress of both their workers or facility to get across the bridge, and for the community to get the other way across the bridge. And that's how it was permitted when they went through the process. And the city of Poway Fire Department looked at that and said, yes, we agree, and that can be used. And that's the extent of what I know.
But that's not the city of Poway, and how would that affect the private property owners that we've been told is down below?
Well, the private property owner owns the entire parcel that we're leasing 10 acres of, and so the property owner agrees that this makes sense as well. So effectively, they're in agreement.
Okay, but the city still has to approve this, correct? The city of Poway?
The fire department already has said, okay. I don't know what approval it does or doesn't need, Dana. I just know that the fire department and the planning group have together said, okay.
Okay. My second question is, what happens next if the board does not approve this project?
If the board doesn't approve this, then what we would do is permit our alternate route, which is a much longer way around through Stonebridge Parkway and avoiding Stonebridge property altogether. And it's about a mile-long run along Stonebridge, which unfortunately would be more environmentally challenging, and we'd avoid Stonebridge going up the hill by going through the Water Authority property to Miramar directly. And that's much more environmentally challenging and disruptive to the community. That would be our secondary backup plan.
Is there a map that you can provide the residents so we can have a visual?
I could probably provide that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dana. All right, James Harrison, I'm unmuting you.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, thanks for putting this on. I think mine is more of a comment and maybe more awareness for the residents on the call. I think there's a lot of information in terms of battery construction that's been a little bit misconstrued here. I'm not actually convinced that anybody on this phone call is a battery expert. LFP is indeed more safe than maybe an MC or LCO based or other chemistries for sure. But just hearing some of the commentary about lithium only being an electrolyte when actually it's a cathode material, lithium carbonate, thermal cutoffs, talking about somebody's just gonna manually turn off the site if there's a thermal impact, to kind of suggest that, you know, passing safety certification means that there's no chance of a thermal event happening in the field is a bit nonsensical, because it happens all the time, right? Every Samsung battery that you ever saw catch fire on a plane passed the safety certification. So I just want to make sure that, you know, it's really painted as rosy on this phone call. And from my perspective, as somebody in the battery industry, it seems more like you're reading a brochure that Tesla gave you to sell some battery packs. So I think maybe next time it would be helpful to bring in like a consultant or somebody that actually is deeply knowledgeable of battery technologies to help better explain to the residents why it might be as safe as you are proposing. But again, I just think it's a little bit too much of a salesman pitch versus a true expert pitch. So I think the residents should know that, and just be aware that some of the information here is maybe not as clean of data as it probably should be. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Okay, next up we have Adria Polselli. I'm unmuting your name, and sorry if I mispronounced your name.
It's okay. Happens a lot. It's Adria Poselli.
Sorry.
So I'm a big believer in trust yet verify. And so this is great that I'm following up after the last gentleman. Yeah, when do we get a third party panel of experts to speak to us about this? Because I feel like you're giving answers and then you're backing away from them and then you're going back to them. For example, the insurance, and talking to your own broker about this and having him run some of our addresses and being like, oh, it'll actually probably help them. Well, maybe it just won't hurt them. Well, which is it? Is it going to help us? Is it going to hurt us? And then also, we're a little gun shy because we were all blindsided by SDG&E a couple of years ago, and all of a sudden ended up with all of these massive towers. So you're talking to a community that kind of went along with something in the past very similar, and then all of a sudden we're like, we didn't actually agree to this, and SDG&E was like, well, you did. And that happened like right as I was moving into here. So I wasn't fully aware of it. I'm sure some people like Tony, Dana, or Cindy have more to say about that. But they at the time said that they couldn't put anything underground. Sorry, I also have a 6-month-old. And so now I'm wondering, is there something that could be done where when you guys are doing this underground, we can move some of those SDG&E lines underground to not be such an eyesore? Is that been something that's been considered? And then when do we see in writing documentation about the ability to use you're fine. To use the fire access roads? Because you're telling us one thing and you're saying someone approved it and to talk to this person and to do that. And I feel like you're just setting us up for failure of a he said, she said argument in 5 years when there is a fire.
Thank you, Adria. I'll respond to what I can remember and talk about some of this stuff. I think the ability to use fire access roads, I think we can put that and request that that's part of our permit condition as well. That while we're operating our facility, that we're required to maintain those, and to the extent that there's any issues, that'll have to be worked out as we're working through the process. But at this point, again, like I said, we have approvals from City of San Diego, and I do believe I have that in writing, so I can provide that as well. And Poway, I think, as this point has been verbally, but that should be something that we can provide to you.
All right.
And I would say not just the city though, the fire department, because the city originally told us when I moved in, I got codes to those locks, and then was told in 2019, 2020 that you no longer have access, and that they changed the locks on them, so we didn't have them. So it needs to be all of the fire department, the police department, the city, whoever has access.
Well, let me put the fire department response to our request up on our website, Adria, and we'll get that so you can take a look at that.
Great. All right. Thank you, Adria. Appreciate it. Last question. And let me just, last question is going to be Tony Garcia. I'm going to unmute you in just 1 second here, but I think the general consensus here is we still have a lot of questions that we will answer online, but that there is a desire by folks to have another in-person community meeting to address questions and concerns. And I see that Bob Ilko has offered to help host that meeting through the Scripps Ranch Community Association. So I just wanted to bring that back to folks that this isn't the last conversation. We understand that there are a lot of questions and we're committed to answering those. So Tony, I'm unmuting you, so you should be able to speak, and you'll be our last speaker for tonight's discussion. Are you there, Tony?
I apologize. I don't have another question. I thought I lowered my hand.
Oh, okay.
I guess though, now that I do have the floor, and I'm kind of being a hypocrite about it, is though I think for the next meeting, we really need to limit one question per person. So not everybody is hogging the time. And really, if you've spoken and you've had your question, let other people ask their question. That's my say, because we had a lot of people come back in and ask more questions or speak on stuff. And we just really need to limit that time to be fair to other people who still have questions. Thank you.
Got it. Thank you, Tony.
Thanks, Tony.
All right. So Keith, do you want to kind of wrap us up with next steps from your perspective, and we'll go from there?
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for their attendance and their interest and questions. It's all helpful for these types of projects. And I just want to say thank you for your attention and attendance. And we've got a couple action items on our side. It sounds like we can work with Bob and you all come up with a date in the next couple of weeks at the outside to try to meet and talk more. But exactly how that'll work, we'll try to get that figured out very shortly and then come back with another meeting date to talk further. But other than that, thank you very much. Appreciate your time and attention and interest, and we look forward to continuing the discussion.
Yeah, and we'll work with, and just again too, we've been in constant communication as best as possible with the HOA of the Stonebridge community. So I would encourage all of you to reach out to your HOA. I don't know that how many people we had speaking tonight that were specifically on the HOA, but as far as communications and our ability to communicate to you as a community, we go through by protocol your HOA. So just to let folks know that, and again, to reach out to them as your elected representatives for your local community too, in addition to just getting the word out about meetings like this. So, all right. So with that, I think we thank everybody. I would just end with a reminder that the website for this project is nighthawkenergystorage.com, and there are Q&As posted on there. As I said, we will post responses to Q&As. We will be posting this meeting as a link on that website, so people can go ahead and go watch the meeting again or take notes from the meeting. Or if you want to email us with additional questions or comments, the email's on the screen now, info@nighthawkenergystorage.com. So with that, I extend the same thank you that Keith did to all of you for spending a couple of hours tonight. We know you have a lot of questions and concerns, and we look forward to continuing to address those as we go forward. So thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.